Broadcasting from New Braunfels, Texas, home of the historic Green Hall and the best river tubing in America. You're listening to PX1 Sports Radio, where we cover the hottest topics in the sports gaming world and the world of sports entertainment. Here's your host, Mike Peters.
What is up, guys? Welcome back. Episode number 6. We are fired up and ready to go. It is March 17th, 2017. We are in the middle of the NFL free agency season, which has been wild so far. Lots of guys switching teams. We also are only a couple weeks away, or about a week and a half away from MLB The Show 17 coming out, and lots of guys are excited about that. Today, we have a special guest on. Kyle Emlet, who is known as Omlinator on PX1 Sports, is joining us to share his opinion on both MLB The Show and specifically online franchise mode and what we found out about that this week, as well as how NFL free agency and the offseason combine and stuff like that can translate a little better into Madden. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and enjoy the show. So the big news coming out this week was that Ramon Russell of MLB The Show said that online franchise is not getting enough user interaction to dedicate programming to making the mode better. And my disagreement to that would be, and has been on Twitter, that if they improved the stamina issues and made the advancement better and more straightforward, that more people would play the game. Now, I know you have said that you've tried to play online franchises in MLB The Show. What is your biggest issue with MLB? And is it the fact that people just aren't playing the mode? Or do you think that the way the mode is integrated is what's making less people play it?
Well, the more that I've played it and the more experience I've had, the integration is definitely a big problem for me. And I think it's a big problem for the community in general. I mean, it's just whenever you get into the game and you see, you got guys who are, going through their schedule in the flex schedule, because that's pretty much the easiest way to do it with the options that are available. You might get schedule. Yeah, I mean, I forget what the different options are, but I know flex was one of them. And
that was one of my big complaints too. Is you don't really know what the schedules say. Right. I remember a couple years ago, I don't know if it was MLB or NBA, but they had a thing, and this would be cool for Madden to implement, honestly. But you could set like a 24-hour advance or a 48-hour advance, and the game would automatically advance for you at that time. You didn't have to log on and manually click a button. You didn't need to have an app and wonder if the app was going to work. You just told the game, advance at this time, and it advanced automatically, and that was amazing. MLB makes that process so convoluted in that you don't really know what you're getting. So I know I kind of took you away from that, but that brought me on to that. Like their advanced process in general, unless you play an open schedule, which is the only thing that really makes sense, the rest of them are just so kind of obtrusive, and it makes it very difficult to manage.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's just very hard to get, and this is just from my personal experience, to get 4 guys on the same page and trying to get them to play within a certain time frame. Now, I can just imagine trying to do that with 15 plus teams in the league. For instance, last year I was the Rangers and I was rolling through the season. I mean, I probably got 3 weeks ahead of maybe the next guy. But you get to the user games and you really want to play those. So you're stuck. You just kind of you had to wait for your opponent to catch up to where you were in order to play games. I mean, an advancement period like you suggested would be great. I mean, that would kind of get everybody to understand that, we have a certain amount of time we want to advance, and if we don't, then it's gonna do it by itself. We're not gonna have to wait around.
Well, and one of the things about that makes the advancing in MLB difficult is you can go through and try to catch up in sim games and whatnot, but the problem is you can't just say, okay, sim everything that hasn't been played to this date. You have to go into each team individually and click advance to this point. Like, that is just it's a waste of time, and it just makes things so much more difficult and so convoluted to run as a league administrator, like going through every team and doing that. And then sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes you get stuck and you got a game that you got to reset. And it's just the problem to me is not that people don't want to play online franchise. The problem is that they haven't put enough resources into making that more straightforward and fluid, and it makes people not want to try it. And like you said, you had 4 guys that were having a hard time doing it. We had, for a lot of last year, 15 or 16 guys, and like you said, you go with an open schedule, and then you have some guy that's played 40 games, another guy that's only played 10. If you want to try to say, hey, we're going to advance to this point, well, then you got to go through every individual team and sim their games up to a point, and it just makes it so complicated. The other problem is last year we tried not to go with an open schedule because there was rotation issues the year before, so we tried to use a set schedule, and my plan was we were going to play 10 games a week. And so the idea was every week we would advance past 10 games. Well, because it's not laid out and not straightforward in what each one of the advance options does, we got stuck where you could only play 3 games every 2 days, I think is what it was. So technically we were getting 10 games a week, but it wasn't opening it up. You were locked into those 3 games every 2 days, and it didn't allow people to play in advance. But we didn't know that. And once we were in there, we couldn't switch it. And so then we got hosed, and we were stuck in this mode. And then just after a season, we're like, all right, people lost interest. They didn't want to play it anymore. And it's like, that's why we didn't play more of MLB The Show. Now, this year, I think it would be great, for a lot of guys with baseball, you want to play 162 games, right? You want your stats to replicate real life, and it's hard to do that in the show. Well, I think this year with adding their critical moments, it gives us an opportunity to really play a 162 game schedule and say, hey, if you just want to play critical moments and go through and you want to bang out, 5-6 games in 30 minutes, cool, do it. If you want to quick sim your games or quick manage them, hey, do that. Let's get through all this. Let's play 20, 30 games a week, and you want to play them out, you want to sim them, that's up to you. And then we can blow through seasons, in 1 month, 6 weeks, kind of like Madden, and we can get through things. That was a great option, I thought, and I thought it would really help online leagues, but then to hear them say, well, not enough people are playing, so we're not dedicating any resources to it. I don't know. To me, it was kind of a slap in the face. What did you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I felt that way about the difference between the show's franchise modes for a long time. I mean, the offline franchises, they have clearly the better options, the better systems for getting things done than the online does. The online is its own thing. It's its own beast. It's very different from playing offline. And it just felt like to me that the Play the Moments feature would have been hands down perfect to help get through such a long schedule. I mean, like you were saying, with having to advance through individual teams' games, I mean, that's so I can't even imagine trying to do that for 15 teams, and to have to sometimes wait for those things to take effect. And like we all live lives. We all have things that we're doing outside of playing video games, and to see that your game's queued for 1 hour, 2 hours. I mean, it's just hard to schedule around those type of things. And I mean, this Play the Moments feature that they had outlined for offline mode sounded just incredible for trying to help us out doing those type of things. And it's just incredibly deflating to hear that not much has been done about the online, especially in that area, because I feel like just that feature by itself could have just propelled the online franchise into something very, very nice for leagues like ours.
You bring up a good point. Like, I thought, okay, well, they're bringing this critical moments in, then it's going to be available in every mode. But now you made me think about it. I'm not even 100% sure it's going to even be available in an online mode this year, which is even more deflating, because it's like, all right, well, then we're going to have the same thing that we had last year. I guess we can go with the open schedule. But the thing that brings up, which we talked about before we got caught on the air, was 2 years ago, there was a huge issue with stamina. And if you had an open schedule and you played games 10, 20 games in advance, because that's when the user you were playing was available, and then you tried to come back and play, games 4, 5, and 6 or whatever, the stamina was just crazy. And so it seems like last year they nerfed the stamina, but the problem with that is they did it for pitching and fielding, so you never had to sit your position players, and for the most part, your pitchers didn't really tire, and we had a guy that would just run the same pitcher out every couple days because there was no stamina. So they went from one issue where they didn't have it working right, which made it difficult, to another one, which was completely unrealistic, and it was like they just kind of neutered it, and I just don't feel like they've really put a whole lot of effort into making a quality online franchise. And then now they're just kind of trying to say, well, nobody's playing it, so we're not going to do anymore. And I don't know. That's frustrating to me. And I've said this a lot about Madden, in any franchise. Your goal as a developer for a online franchise setting should be to make the process of running that franchise as simple as possible. That means you need to make the advancing as simple as possible. Going into each team and having a queue games. No, in Madden, you advance. It advances when you're done. It sims the games that haven't been played, and you're ready to go. There's no sitting in a queue. There's no waiting. Guys, you tell people when you're going to advance, the guys can play as soon as you're done advancing. MLB, if you want to have an online franchise and you want to have one that people play, you got to get rid of the queue, and you got to allow people to know when it's getting advanced and be ready to play at that time. Or if you have an open schedule and you want to allow guys to advance to a certain point, sim games to try to make the stats match up, then you got to give us that option to do it, and you got to make it easier for us to do that. I get it's a complex problem. It's a problem that Madden doesn't have. Madden is perfectly suited for an online franchise because it's 17 games. You can advance every 24 to 48, 72 hours, whatever you want to do, and it's very, very easy. It's much different when you've got 82 or 162 games. I get it. It's difficult, but that's the space you're in. And, a lot of things go into online. You got to try to, give your users what they want and at least the features to make them easier. My thought on it, at least, I don't know whether they're going to listen to us or not, but hopefully they do, because I think it's something that could definitely help MLB out and make it a much more enjoyable game and open it up to a larger user base and keep guys interested longer. Because typically when our franchise shuts down, I'm done playing MLB. I like Diamond Dynasty a little bit, but not as much as franchise. And if I lose interest in playing an online franchise after a month, I'm pretty much done playing MLB, and I don't want that to happen. I play Madden all year round for the most part. I want to be able to play MLB for at least 4, 5, 6 months through the baseball season, but the way they have it set up, that makes it difficult. Transitioning a little bit, we are in the offseason of the NFL. We're in the end of week 2 of free agency on March 17th. And we were talking a little bit about how what's happened so far with the combine and NFL free agency can be implemented into Madden. And to some degree, Madden replicates it well. The first week of free agency, most of the big names were gone, and you see that in Madden. So I think they do that well. The second week of free agency slows down a little bit, more depth guys, and then next week, the third week of free agency, and so on, is where you're going to get the rest of them. So I think they do okay there. I don't want to really see a change in that. The thing that's different with real life free agency in Madden is that in real life free agency, we saw a lot of guys sign without talking to a whole lot of clubs. In Madden, you can, in theory, have, I think at one point we saw 26 teams offering one player. And in NFL, you don't see that. Like, there's guys that just, they're only going to say, like, I want to play for one of these 5 or 8 teams. They're playoff teams, and then some of those teams don't have an interest in them, so they might only get 3 or 4 offers from the teams they want to play for. And it would be nice to have something like that replicated in Madden. If you were able to customize your perfect free agency mode, which both simulated real life, but also helped the average user in an online franchise kind of enjoy the mode, what would you do to improve the free agency in Madden?
Well, I think first of all, this kind of feeds into some of the things that a lot of us have wanted a long time in the game, is there needs to be some type of player characteristics or personality. We see some of that in 2K with player traits, things of that nature. But I mean, especially in a game like football where injuries matter so much and personal preference matters so much, there's a lot of dynasties that, I mean, you see the Patriots cleaning up all these players that, whether it be trade or free agency or anything, people want to go there because they're going to win. And there's definitely a type of player that attracts there. And I think that there's a type of player for every type of situation for teams around the league. And I think it would just be extremely helpful to see a guy who maybe cares a little bit more about making money than he does about winning, or guys who want to play close to home or where they went to college at, things of that type of nature. Winning even comes down to maybe weather conditions in that city. I mean, we were talking about it before we started the podcast, but I mean, you see Minnesota, and that's a cold location, and there's maybe not a large number of players that wouldn't play there because of that, but there's definitely some who maybe they just cross that location off the map whenever they go into free agency because they don't want to play for a cold weather team.
Or you
mean,
have
there's
L.A. and Jacksonville who are cleaning up in free agency and, not surprisingly, have great weather. So it definitely plays a role, right?
Right. I mean, you also see with L.A. they have a new coach, so maybe scheme has to go into that. I mean, there's a lot of factors that players take into account that just aren't. They're just, you haven't seen them in the last couple Maddens, and I can remember when they were there, and I understand that the game's transition from platform or generation to generation, but I mean, it's nice to remember how that was and how maybe you have a lot of money in free agency, but you see guys going to other teams despite that. I mean, it's just something that would be nice to see.
Well, Cleveland is a great example of that. They had $100 million in cap space going into this free agency. Now, they signed a couple of linemen, and they got a really good offensive line. But other than that, there's not an influx of guys. They could pay more than anybody else, but it wasn't like all these guys outside of a couple of linemen that they signed were running to Cleveland and trying to sign there. And so you're right. We need more traits, and not just personality traits. We could get into a long discussion on player traits as far as differentiating players the way they play on the field. But in the offseason, we definitely need more personality, and we need guys, like you said, that want to play in warm weather or want to play close to their hometown or their college town, or they want to play for a winner, or they just want to go where the money is, whoever's going to pay them the most. It can make it difficult, and I can get in an online franchise, or even an offline franchise for that matter, where you have guys who complain because they want to sign the number one free agent and they got told no because they weren't good enough or they couldn't offer enough money, or probably more or less they could offer enough money, but they didn't have the right coach, they didn't have the right location, and then so they're complaining. So, and again, this goes back to my idea where I said make everything as simple for the commissioner as possible. I don't know how easy it is to turn these things on and off, but if you want to cater to everybody, you got to give us as many options as possible, and you got to allow us to turn things on and off. So I think you do that by creating the game with the player personalities involved. And you say, free agency is going to be dictated on all these factors. And some teams they're going to say, no, we don't want you. Or I don't want to play for you. And then you have the option to turn that off. If you want to play in a league where it's all about money wins and that's it, well, then you turn the player personalities off. If you want to play in an offline league where you're the only person playing and you want to dominate because you're going to save up your money and you're going to sign all the best free agents, then turn that off. That's the biggest thing. And I think we're seeing that with the big debate between competitive Madden and Sim Madden, is so many different people want so many different things. And that's the great thing about NBA 2K, is they have so many options about how you want to customize your game that I think every game needs to learn from that. NHL did great with allowing a simulation mode and regular mode, which is more of a slider mode. I think it's going to be more complex than Madden because I don't know that simulation mode and regular mode in NHL is quite the same dynamic as what competitive guys want in Madden, but we just need more options. We need options to customize our leagues, our gameplay, everything else as much as possible. Now, with that playing into it, we have the Combine. just a few weeks ago. And Madden, I think, does an okay job as far as giving us the combine results in the offseason, and so we can kind of see guys and we can find out about them. I don't know if I love the system. I don't hate the system. I don't love it. What do you think about the combine in Madden and how it's implemented, and what could they do to make that a little bit better?
Well, I've always loved the combine numbers, and this year just kind of felt like a thrown in at the end kind of. I mean, it was like this last year too, but I mean, it's just kind of the numbers get thrown in there, and that's what they are, and it's just something nice to look at whenever you're looking through prospects. I mean, I really do think that combine numbers matter, but maybe some other parts of the combine week could be added that could, bring some, like we were talking about, bring in some characteristics. I mean, they do how many things over that weekend? I mean, obviously they have the drills, which is a huge part of it, but then you've got personality tests, you got interviews, you've got a whole lot of things going on that week that determine scheme and fit, and if people want that type of player. I mean, we saw, I want to say, I believe it was DeMarcus Lawrence. Whenever he was coming out, he was touted pretty high, maybe even first round. And the minute that some of his interviews hit the media, his value dropped so much. I believe he didn't get drafted till the second or third round. And I mean, stuff like that. They try to do a little bit of that in the game with like player stories and stuff like that. But how many are those during a year? Maybe 2 or 3 a season, and sometimes they don't even seem to matter to the player. I mean, I just think that there's a lot more happening in Combine weekend or week that we don't see in the game that could be really helpful going forward.
I think that's actually a pretty interesting point. Because I was just thinking about NBA. If you play My GM, you can interview your coaches, you can interview free agents, you can interview your CFO, all these different things, right? And so it would be kind of interesting if you could go into, even in an online franchise, right? I think you can build this in there. If you could build it in where every user is able to go in and talk to, say, 10 prospects, right? And
right, cap it off.
Yeah, I mean, you get 10 prospects you can go into. There's a week, maybe a week in the off season, or maybe just throughout the season you can select prospects to interview. And it just, based on their personality profiles, they're going to answer a certain way based on, what questions come up. And then you have, say, let's say 5 different questions or 5 different choices for questions, or slots for questions with 3 choices each, say. So let's say, maybe like in NBA, it says, how do you feel about our team? How do you feel about our roster? How do you feel about the position we want you to play? How do you feel about our coaching staff? All that stuff, right? So let's say you have, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those on there. You can ask about scheme. You can ask about location. You can ask about roster. You can ask about coach, or you can ask about owner. You can ask about, are they a loyal player? Would they rather play for a winner or rather play for the most money? And you can get answers to these questions. Now, granted, you're only going to get 10 guys, so it's going to be a little bit limited in what you can do. But then think about, in an online franchise, most of us now use some kind of communication device like Slack or GroupMe or Discord or something like that. Imagine going in there and say, man, I just interviewed so-and-so, and he told me this, this, and this, right? Well, now you start spreading rumors throughout the league, and then that changes how people perceive guys. You could even go in and say, man, I just interviewed such and such, and he gave me answers to these questions, and you might just be trying to sell bull goods to your other owners because you want them not to draft him. I mean, it could add such an added element to the game, and that kind of leads to another thing. Like, since online leagues are so much about talking amongst people, they got to add more things like that allow us to create the stories and to get interacted with each other outside of it. If you had storylines and stuff like that too, that you can interview players, and Wunderlich test would be another thing. You talked about testing that they do at the Combine. Let me see a Wunderlich test and actually have it mean something in the game. Morris Claiborne got one of the lowest Wunderlich scores of anybody in recent memory, and he turned into a great player last year, but it took him a long time to figure out the NFL game, right? So you can be a really skilled player, but if you don't have you don't have a high Wunderlich, maybe that means that your progression is going to be slow, and it's going to take you a while to get where you're going. Doesn't mean you can't get there. It just means you're going to be slower in getting there, and that should be something that affects the player. Now, maybe Vince Young's another example. If I can't really think of anybody who's got a low Wunderlich who's actually turned out to be great, maybe there's one out there, but that could be something, instead of telling us or just having us draft somebody and then just arbitrarily we find out if they have superstar or star development or a quick or normal whatever, we see their Wunderlich. And if they have a high Wunderlich, doesn't mean they're going to be superstar development. Means they're normal. But if we know they got a low development, at least we know that's somebody that we might risk. Maybe they still have normal development, or maybe they have slow. And it's something that we can kind of like make a risk on, and it's something that people can talk about and say, man, this guy got like a 12 Wunderlich. I don't know if I want to draft him. And it just creates a lot of stories. We're running out of time, but we got a little bit just on what I said on there. What do you think along those lines? How would you like to see some of that implemented?
Well, the more that you talked about the Wunderlich, the more I just got all kinds of things going on in my head about it. I mean, even if it's not telling you, maybe it hints at that development. Maybe it gives a little clues about what they're going to be like whenever they are a pro. Maybe if they have a low Wunderlich, they also have a high combine score. So maybe you kind of got to balance. Maybe they don't develop as fast, but maybe they're going to come out the gate with those raw attributes that you want to see, like speed, strength, quickness, all that type of stuff. I mean, just any type of thing that we can have more information on would be just great. And as for the creating storylines and things between owners and stuff, I mean, all I can think of is back in NCAA football when you could hop on your laptop and get on their website and you could create stories that would actually end up in the game. I mean, just stuff like that is just, I find it very fun, and it adds another element that, just playing by yourself doesn't have. And I just would love to see those type of things implemented more.
I actually forgot about that, the NCAA part of it, where you could type up your story on there and you add it. Unfortunately, so many people were clamoring for an app that we finally got an app, but I don't think anybody that was clamoring for an app realized that we were also going to lose the website with it. It was kind of an either or, and they didn't really give us that choice. They said, oh, okay, everybody wants an app, so let's do the app and we're going to scrap the website. And, things like that could have been useful. I mean, the not having an app limits some of the things that we can do on Daddy Leagues. We can't sign free agents on Daddy Leagues anymore. We can't apply XP on Daddy Leagues. The online website gave us a lot of features that they kind of stripped down, but it also opened up possibilities like that, like creating storylines. And one of the things that was really cool about that is you had highlight videos that you could make in the game and upload it to the website, and then they would appear on the game, like on each person's individual highlight reel. Like you could scroll through I don't remember exactly where it was in there, but you could scroll through and watch people's highlights directly in the game that they saved. Like that was cool. And for stuff like what we're trying to do with top plays and stuff like that, that just adds a level of immersion. And I think to some degree, and I know Madden's different than NCAA and they're completely different concepts, but to some degrees, I think that they've kind of lost sight of that to some degree, like the immersion of it. I understand trying to replicate a lot of these things, but they strip out some things and they go in certain directions, and we lose some aspects of it. And hopefully, I know Rex has told me before, and I've seen him on Twitter, sometimes you gotta cut back down to the bare bones to go for it. And I get it. Sometimes the facade of the house is in such bad shape that you got to rip it all down and just the bones are good. And sometimes you've got to repair the bones and you got to build back up. And I get it. So maybe we're there. Maybe this is a long process and that they've been going through, and then this year we're going to see tons of great things that we don't even expect. We'll see, but it's just funny looking at some of the other games and some of the things that they do, and even some of the older games that they did, where they were and where they're going. All we can do is hope that they're on the right track and they're doing some things. I'm excited either way to find out what they're doing this year. I know the Frostbite engine's coming. I think a lot of people think it's going to fix stuff. It's not. I mean, it's most likely going to mostly going to help for graphical upgrades and help with things like physics. It can make implementing new things easier, but they're still going to have to rip it out and recode it, so it's not going to fix everything. So for those of you that are thinking Frostbite's going to save everything that's wrong with Madden, don't feel that way. It's not gonna be that way. I'm not an expert on it, but from what I've seen in FIFA and what I've read about, it's mostly gonna be graphical and physics-based things, gonna allow them to do more things in that space. But it's not really gonna just automatically fix everything that's wrong with it. But anyway, I appreciate you coming on, and you got some great ideas. You definitely sparked my mind as far as thinking of some things that maybe I hadn't thought of before. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, follow you on Twitter and whatnot, what's your Twitter handle? You got anything out there where guys can get in touch with you?
Yeah. Let me pull it up quick, as I'm not actually being in the league has actually helped me use my Twitter a little more than I normally would. So let me pull it up here.
Twitter use, especially when the devs are out there, and that's the way to contact them.
All right, my Twitter handle is at KEmlet13. Just hit me up there. That's fine.
Emlet, EMLET 13.
Yep.
Cool. And you're also the Jets in our franchise, and suffered your first loss this last week. But you're now at 7-1.
Hey, I'll take that.
Yeah, 7-1, and I think you're tied for the best record in the AFC. And I think you finished with the number 1 seed last year. So definitely gonna be interesting to see how those things go. Appreciate you being on. Thanks for the time, and thanks for sharing your ideas. And hopefully we'll catch up again a little bit down the road.
All right, I had a great time.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the PX1 Sports Radio Podcast. For more, you can find us on Twitter at PX1 Sports or online at px1sports.com. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.